Here we go. Hello and welcome to this buildingSMART room session as a part of the buildingSMART International Standards Summit Rome 2023. Thank you for joining. My name is Jeffrey Olette and I will be your moderator today. Today's session is titled Governance of Data for the Product Room, our second session in the product room. You will be hearing a presentation from Radboud, and is Frédéric going to present, or is he in another session? Okay. The session is scheduled to last 90 minutes. It is being recorded and will be made available in the replay section of the event as soon as possible. Before I hand it over to Radboud, I would like to remind you that this is a hybrid event. For online attendees, your microphones will remain muted for the duration of this session. If you wish to ask a question, please use the chat box in the control panel. Whoa. For those in the room, please try to keep the background noise to a minimum. Says the window. And raise your hand if you wish to make a comment or ask a question. We do have microphones here and we will pass them around so everyone online can also hear the questions. I would also like to bring to your attention that buildingSMART, there we go, is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favor any particular provider, are open, non-binding, and accessible to all. So please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. So give me a moment here while I switch all of this over.
Thanks, Jeff, for the introduction and what needs to be done. Nice to see so many people here. Thank you for joining. My name is Baayen. I work in the Netherlands at a company called Ketenstandard. Might best be translated as value chain standards. We manage standards for the Dutch construction industry, which go from classification, identification, communication, and specification. For the product room session, we try to combine a lot of knowledge from you to help us to bring forward how we can do construction object data throughout the life cycle for the construction industry. But first, I would like to take, because not all of you have been here throughout the whole seasons. So what we do when you get a Netflix series you start up, first thing you get is previously on. So that's where I will start. Previously on the product room. So after COVID, because we just started anew just before COVID and everything came to a grinding halt, we had a meeting just before COVID in Zurich. That's where we started off last year before Montreal in Brussels to see where are we going to go. And first thing was trying to do a workshop as a product room steering committee. What are the topics that we should focus on? And what is our position within the buildingSMART community? And we looked at the way it's organized. We have a lot of domain rooms, a lot of knowledge there, and we have some rooms that are going straight through, like the technical room is needed to get all that knowledge across. Regulatory room is for other things like permitting and stuff, and the product room is about object data throughout the process, so we weave them through the other rooms. And what we try to do is take that into account and do a session where we got some main topics out of it. And the next step was going to Montreal and get the input from the community back, because with the 10 members of the product room, we all, of course, have only so much knowledge. And we had a couple of good sessions. We did it in 2 times to get more input from the industry, from the community. And the main topics we got to show was, I will get back to those in a minute. So what we worked on was a couple of items called LCA characteristics for IFC, which is a starter. It's been done. It's the items are in the data dictionary, and in the last session of the data dictionary, it was actually presented. And working on IFC for projects, which is on a proposal stage. So those are 2 things that we've done in the past years as a product room. And the other items that were coming from the workshop sessions, life cycle of information, the need to be able to create, to support to create a process map, how is it going to work? That's one of the items where we still looking for support. So if you're willing to support on that subject, please come forward. Another topic is, what is the definition of a product? Because a lot of people, if they hear product, they will say manufacturer. We will say construction object. So there's a difference there. We tend to have or plan to have a white paper this year on what the definition of a product is. And if I'm correct, that's Petter is leading this one. The other thing is having industry input and create use cases. And we will have a session on that with industry input tomorrow. So if you're interested in we have 4 speakers actually doing presentations on what they do with data and what their need for data is in the day-to-day work they do. And of course, then the other item that came up in Montreal was governance of data. We need to be able to rely on the data we're looking at, and that's the subject for now. And then we had a room leader meeting this February in London, and there we had some workshops. And when it came to governance of data, we had a group of about 10 people, I think Michelle was there, to give us input on why is this needed, because a lot of people are talking about this. It has to do with responsibility, so you know what the source data is, who's working on that, and what the data is that's available within the buildingSMART data dictionary and where it comes from. Transparency, one of the words that we are very big about in buildingSMART. Transparency on how data is created, but also who verifies data. If there's a stamp on the data in the data dictionary, this is verified, you would like to know who has verified it, on what basis of what it is verified, so you can rely on the data. And then we were talking about having a process for governing the data. Well, that's what I want to go into. And for authors, but also updated versions, versioning, etc. So that's basically what we've been doing. And the question is, how do we know what we see in the BSDD is reliable? And you say, what? No, it's more about how. We're not going to talk about what it is, but we're trying to get to the point where we can say, okay, you know how it's done, and that's why it's reliable. So I took some examples because it's you can start from scratch, but a lot of source holders are doing this for years. So I took some examples from my own company and some from abroad. So CoBuilder is doing work on this. CRB from Switzerland is doing this also for years. And at Cato Standard, we manage multiple standards, and I took 3 out, where ETIM is managed internationally and done by member states or member countries. And I would like to start with the structure, because we manage multiple standards different ways. They are from legacy, so there's different needs and responsibilities there. And why I would say it, this is coming. This is what we call our pizza plate. So basically it will say this is the construction industry, and you need data to be put in there. I don't have to explain it to this group, but we try to explain it to our industry, what actually the standards we are managing are doing for those various stages. And probably it's best if you look back at the presentation, because I'm going very fast through this. But it all has to do with how can I get from conceptual level to a detailed product level, which I can actually order and get through the process here. So how do we manage that at Cato Standard? We merged just before COVID. We had the same problem as the product room. So we were not yet a complete family. So what happens when you're offline off-site, I must say, you work in your own silo. And that's what actually happened for the past 2 years when we were in lockdown. So we came together. I didn't hardly knew my other colleagues. We worked in the teams itself. And about a year ago, we actually could start working on integration. The way it's organized is we have a small board, but that's not that's only the financial part. They don't have to do anything with content. On the content side, we have what we call strategic advisory board, which contains all the chairpersons from the management groups from the various standards. That's where the year plans are made. That's where the actual stakeholders for that specific standards are in, and it comes together in the strategic advisory board. It's, I think, not very different at other organizations that are around here. Beyond that level of management, there's expert groups, committees on specific domains. So for STABU, we have work sections. So we might have people from restoration work putting in their knowledge so we can use it in the development of the specification system. And for ETIM, there's groups on specific levels for HVAC or electrotechnical, and that comes together, and that will actually provide new input for the standard. So focusing on one of those, STABU. Nobody ever heard of this except Michel and Fritz and Enzo. Oh wow, more than I thought. Now this is our national specification system, which is basically where you write your technical specification, which is the basis for the contract between the owner and the contractor. And it's been in use since 1990. And as my former boss said, it's an electronic system. And the most used button in the software is the print button. And so much for digitization in the early stage. So what we actually do when it comes to, this is more about managing and about, we call it publishing. Right? We need to be able to see what happens throughout the years. It's one of the things as a topic for governance of data is being able to backtrack. So if I have a project and it's 15 years old and the legislation has changed or the building codes have changed, I need to be able to open that project. So I use an open standard, IFC for instance, but I also need the data from the building codes to see, can I do a clash detection on what happened back then and what are the building codes at this moment and be able to match that up. So continuously working and versioning is a topic that we're working on. So you have at Kate Standard, you have 2 meetings on the strategic level. So this is an advisory board, and on management level, we do 3 times a year, which keeps track of what we are actually accomplishing. And on the content level, we have 4 publications each year. It used to be 2. Everything is in cloud now. So you would say, okay, we can do that every day, but our specifiers will go crazy if we do that every day. So we do it 4 times a year, and we do release notes to go with it. And when it comes to manufacturer information, we have about 600 manufacturers in there with about 10 to 13,000 specifications that will be done on a daily basis. So next day, the specifier will have the most actual manufacturer data and can rely on that. So putting them next together, I'm not a very big fan of bullet points, but I didn't know any other way for this list to get in there. So we have 2 parallel lines. Like I said, generic specification clauses. Pretty much every specification system has a classification and clauses to be able to write the actual specification, which is the result. What we do is we use standards, we use legislation, we use norms, work that into the system. So you have in this case, you have a subscription to the system, and that's when where you can also you pay for the maintenance most of the time, but you can rely on that we do our work and you have the most actual data. And we have peer groups of users, peer groups of software partners to be able to test and to look at the content before it's actually published. And when it's published, there's a release note, which we call a verantwoording. I think release notes might be the best way to tell on the content, so they know what has changed. Because a lot of them are still on an old system. We have a fairly modern API. But some of the software companies that we're working with, I'm not going to say that out loud, we have to push the data out in a TXT format. So it comes from a key value pair database. and push it out in a sort of TXT formats for them to be able to put it in. And we have users testing the data before it's actually released. On the manufacturer clauses, it's continuously, but we also say there's a lifespan in there. If the specification or the clause from a manufacturer is older than 2 years, it needs to be revised. So we send it out to the manufacturer, you get back, okay, there's no changes, then we will prolong it and it will be available for another 2 years. So we know that products that are not available anymore in the market will be taken out once they're 2 years old. And we've tried to help them, of course, to make use of those specifications, which is at this moment basically on their website next to their product information sheets to post it there. But for the specifier, it is, I'm working on masonry, I need a brick, and then you get a list of manufacturers with a specification to go with it. So that's on the content. Michel, you might have to help me here a little bit because you had very difficult slides to go with it. But I would say, because this is in German, which is not my native language, not even my second language, but I would say there is a same kind of structure in there to come from the start of a development to a delivery. Am I correct? Okay. And you can see here that CRB is even a bit further because they have done this in even a UML schema to see, okay, what are the steps in our process? And that's the transparency of the process itself. So we can also learn from each other to get this further and see what is the steps that are being taken to be able to get the data out there and know that you can work with it. Those were the two that you provided me. So I will go into the next one, which is ITEM. And ITEM, Jeroen van der Holst is here. He is from ITEM International. And ITEM International actually has some God mode on the ITEM classification. So they will check any request for change. There is a process for requests for changes to be processed and being put in the next release. And there's two ways to release it. One is a dynamic release, which will be continuously, and one is a fixed release every 2 years. 2 years is the goal, yeah. So every 2 years there will be a next step. Actually, tomorrow he will be talking about ITEM 9 just released and how it's put in the BSDD. Well, these are some figures of what ITEM is and what's in there. It started out as the electrotechnical information model, and now it's the European information model, and we're even past that, so it's the experimental. No.
I opted for eloquent, but I'm still working on my associates.
Okay.
But they said it's the EG technical information model.
Well,
it's an acronym in itself.
Find something for the E.
We'll have a contest.
Yeah. So I waited too long, probably. No, there it is. So there's a governance level there too, which is a bit more difficult because you have countries. Like at buildingSMART, we have chapters, and all country members have a seat to contribute. And there's technical committees, and there's like we have a technical room. You might compare it to the technical committee, and they have a mandate on certain levels. And the technical committees, they go into groups with, again, specific domains which have to be developed. And from the country members, they also have technical committees, and the country members will put in requests for change. And depending on the experience of the country, the request for change might be more or less complete, but there is a guideline of about 30 pages, you told me, 36 pages, which tell you exactly what you need to do to be able to put data in there and have it accepted by the ITEM International Committee to put into the next release. So these guidelines help you as a user to actually know what you have to do, and this is also for the users on the other side to know what you're going to get.
Actually, the people from Cape Town
Sorry. So actually, the people from Keten Standard who run ATEM Netherlands, and Philip, my friend from Norway, who is running the show in Norway for Norwegian members, they act as a filter. So they run everything by the guidelines. They submit everything, and me, myself, and my associate Mark, we review all the requests together with somebody from ATEM Germany, that's Carl Papas. Basically, what we do is we call bullshit. So whenever there's a redundant feature, redundant class, overlaps, or things are ambiguous, because we want a product to be classified only into one class. And it's a hell of a job, especially when you have over 5,500 classes. And that's all we do. We sift through all the requests, and we're talking about more than around 1,800 requests each year. Whenever there's like there's also a whole process about peer reviewing. So if the Netherlands is submitting a request and we approve it according to the guidelines, there's always a 60-day period so that ATEM Sweden can look at it as well and say we agree or we disagree with it. So, and then when there's discussions, they go to the technical committees per sector.
The good thing about this process is, of course, that as a user of the data, you know exactly what you're going to get. So you know that this process is in place and that you can rely on the data, or at least you know how it's done. And that will help you. And that's what Arthur said, of course, that you can rely on the people putting data in because they have their governance structure. That's very important.
And you can backtrack it on our classification management tool back to 2009 of all the requests that have been processed.
Yeah, I didn't put that slide in. I didn't took the screenshot from the CMT, but there is a management tool where that's in. Yeah. But I did put this one in just to show you that there's a whole thing. It's just like ISO processes. They're the same, and I don't know if there's on some topics there's also a timeline, right? You have to be responsive in a certain amount of time before it goes through.
It's very simple. More than half of the requests get rejected the first time, to be honest. As long as they don't do their homework and they resubmit it, nothing's going to be changed according to the new version. So by the time we go to a release, then we set a deadline and we try to empty the trove of all the pending requests. And if you, well, and at some stage we have to just empty the request. Yeah.
And I think this is the task of the source of the data actually. So that's good that this is on the ATEM side. It's done. So when you look at this data, also if you look at this data through the BSDD, you can rely on this process, on this data. So you have statuses, so you also can backtrack, just like you said. You know which state is in, and if it's published, it will never leave because, or do you really delete it, or is it inactive?
It will be deleted at some point. After the release, we will delete everything that has been marked for deletion during in between.
So it's like cutting the trees.
Yes. Somewhere in the background, somewhere hidden in the database, we can still backtrack there. But that's at some time you have to throw it away just to keep the overview. Yeah,
clear. So this is a slide that you put in for how it works with an IDS.
Well, this is more a little bit of our vision on information delivery specification. That's how we run things with, we basically talk to manufacturers and wholesalers. And what we discovered over 30 years is what you don't want is that wholesalers start to classify products that are made by manufacturers because they don't know what's going on. I used to work for a manufacturer. I didn't even know what the R&D was up to in my own company. And it was very difficult to keep everything accurate. So what we say is product data belongs to the manufacturer. Article data, delivery time, price, packaging, is belonging to whoever is selling it. So a product has multiple instances of the article data. But the responsibility of the technical features should always come from the manufacturer.
And I think this is one of those topics that we should take into account on how this information is being brought to the end user and being updated, and we can rely on it. And probably GS1 is one of the parties that's also included in this process.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on IDSs, but I think if at some part you can put this in the IDS.
Yeah. So this was one of those in between slides. Okay, so I'll skip to the next one. Sure. Thanks for the addition. I got 2 slides from Frédéric on the co-builder process. I hope I summarize it correctly. Otherwise, you will correct me, or Lars will jump me. Yeah, probably. But the thing is, as I understand, it's you have sources of data. And I think that is never going to change. We have manufacturers, like you said, you worked at a pretty big manufacturer. They have the chance to update their data. But when it comes to manufacturers or distributors in our sector, we try to count it in the Netherlands. The top 100, they have product information management systems, etc. But we have about 9,000 of them. And a lot of those distributors only have a PDF file, if you're lucky. And they just sell boxes. That's basically what they do. So if we talk about federated data exchange, we really want to have data that's reliable. That's actually, data hygiene is the first step, to actually have data you can use. And they're not in the business of updating their data, so you have to help them. So it comes from different sources. They call it different. And somewhere you have to create something that's common, and even abbreviations are different. I know from a company in the Netherlands that they started, we have Measury work, Measury W dot, all kinds of different ways you can write it down, but it's all the same. And a common data dictionary will help you to be able to match it up, even within your own environment. Is that about what meaning was, right? Okay, so then the next step would be, okay, I have a common language. The common language we have in Europe is the CPR when it comes to technical stuff. Based on the 7 basic principles that were just shown in the last presentation at the former group. So we have ISO standards, harmonized EN standards, and they all have an addition which we call the ZA index, which has what they call essential characteristics. Those essential characteristics are needed to get a CE marking. So you will be able to trade your products within Europe if you have a CE marking, when there is a harmonized standard. And as it is with the hairdresser and the painter, you do it well in your professional job, but ISO and CEN need to look at their own standardization, because there's also different words being used or different terms being used. So harmonizing the harmonized standards is also another challenge, but that's the first thing you do. Then you have national standards to go on top of that, which are for your own domain, which have to be met. I think that's everywhere. We have it in Norway. You have it, and then the next step, of course, is okay. But I have information that's specific for me. Like we at Stabu say, when it comes to specification, we put the generic characteristics there, and then some manufacturer said, "Yeah, but my mirror has a golden edge." Well, that's nice for you. That's a different thing. That's not what we're going to specify, but they want to put it down somewhere. So you need to be able to have the room to actually put it down somewhere. So there's levels in there. Yes, please. You get a microphone for me, Lars.
I just want to talk about the common language, because I think there has been a lot of discussions, and just to exemplify, when we use a classification schema, let's say in the US they use Omni-class, I guess, could be, yeah. In Europe we have many different classification schemas. So when we classify like this room, what kind of room is it? We would call it differently. So when you're working in a dictionary, actually you can decide what kind of classification you use. But that doesn't mean that organizations shouldn't be sitting together to say, let's use the same classification schema. So the dictionary will allow you to develop whatever classification you want. And then when it comes to data sets, so there might be some global data sets, let's say for asset management. I want to create a data set for asset management. That could be kind of a global thing, which is kind of what the IFC is doing, creating kind of more high-level global data sets, requirements that can be used for requirements. But when we go down to the industry, you will always have specifications, specifics. That's where the industry today very often sit down and they use Excels, where they try to write and develop the requirements. And I think that tomorrow we will show IDS and we will show Loin principles. And I think the importance here is that for organizations like a manufacturer, a contractor, a building owner, someone that wants to build something, if they sit together and agree on a common language, common classification, then data exchange is easier if you're using a kind of a high-level dictionary. So for the implementation of the Loin standard, I think the relevance of data dictionaries is very important, because if you want to make information requirements machine readable, the dictionary will allow you to make it machine readable, which is something different than human readable. You can also make it human readable. But I think this conversation, Radboud, that the dictionary is really the transformation to machine readable data is important also in this conversation.
Yeah, you need machine readable also to be able to verify and validate if
Yes.
your question you have asked is fitting with the answer you got.
Yeah.
So it's a requirement and a requirement filler that needs to be fit together. Some people in the room might remember the hamburger model. You have a function and you have a technical solution to go up with the function.
So if you can go back one slide, just to explain in practice. So that means that if you go back one slide, that means that your organization should be sitting together with the right players to agree on the common language. What should we use? And that is collaboration across. That's meaning that a government should work with an industry, or a body should work with industry, and really to develop a common data sets, common way of specifying information in a dictionary. And that is a change, because today that's spread all around and people are sitting by themselves. And this is a cultural thing where we need to change as an industry to have more collaborative way of working, defining the content that, or the information that we want to exchange. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your addition, Lars. It's valuable. Frédéric.
Just an add-on on the next slide. Yeah. Can you go back? Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. Next one. Thank you. Just quickly on this one that's related to what Lars said. Right now we are establishing working groups who are working on national and industry data dictionaries. And those guys are gathering, discussing, and deciding we need this property for this kind of object. Cool. Then we are applying really clearly a standard that is saying when you want to do a change, you need to create a request. This is sent to expert, blah, blah, blah. I won't tell the story again. There is no point. But in CoBuilder, we are a bit more tough than this. Maybe that's the Nordic way or the French way. I don't know. But even if you are a British Standardization Institute, knowing your stuff, creating property in the National Data Dictionary, this will not be published. This will go through a phase that we call data auditing. So experts of the sector will check what those guys have done. And maybe those national standard bodies are the best in the world for stuff, but still they can make a mistake. So this is going through data auditing. Experts are checking this content, and it can happen that here you have created something that is existing here. And in this case, this is never published. We just go back to them and say, wait, there is something existing, please reuse it. And I think that's all the point around this governance tool, not to recreate duplicates, to be able to check by the right person that what we are doing is the right thing, to be able at the end to have a common thing that everyone can trust. And for me, that all this governance stuff is really about trust, even if we have several levels. Let's be tough on this, because that's what we use every day. And when we are using the wrong content, then we are starting to lose a lot of money on construction. So for me, this is really about trust and having the right things.
I think trust is a good word to use, Frédéric. And you're right to be tough, because we need to educate everybody, but it's also it helps to be able to relying on the information. So this does fit in with the next last example I have, which is DECO, which is a communication standard. So basically, you don't write a email anymore, but you fill in your fields in a template, and that's transferred by an XML file. So we use it for invoicing, we use it for ordering, we use it for maintenance messages. So it's a messaging service, and we call it transaction messages or data messages or maintenance messages. So it can be a request, which is then answered with a response. And this is implemented in software where we have about, well, I always forget the figures. It was about 1.5 million transactions per month through the software with this standard. And the thing is that we built this structure we have in the Netherlands called BOMOS, which is a model, I think made by TNO actually, on how to manage open standards, because it has to do with transparency and the governance about it. And they have a couple of levels in there. The first one is strategy. Well, I talked about it before, how we implemented that in Keten Standard. There's support. Well, we do that here at buildingSMART. Jeff used to be in the implementer support group for years. You have tactics, so there's the community, the architecture that's being used, adoption, which is something we're doing at the moment at the digital system for the built environment, a big program in the Netherlands. Operational, of course, you need to be able to do the request for change stuff, and communication, you need to promote and be able to publish. And there's one item in there which is called complaint handling. And at the DECO standard, we implemented this stuff also in our maintenance document. And one was the request for change process, which is fairly straightforward. I think for a lot of people, you get a new request for change, you get a feedback on it. It's in progress, it's being confirmed, state says solved, and then it will be closed. Well, and this could be done in a day, or it could be done in months, but there is a process for that. And the other process that was initiated was the complaint process, and there's I tried to translate it and summarize it a bit, but if you put an objection in, you have to have a certain amount of information to go with it, so you know what it's about, who is sending it, reason, etc. And that can only be done after a publication, and you have 4 weeks time. It's just like you get your tax return invoice and you say, well, I don't agree with it. Don't wait too long with that, because then you just have to pay it. Same here. Then there is a decision on the objection. People working at ISO know how it works. You have a balloting stage and you have a response time. And if you get a response back, that will be motivated. So if you have a objection, you will get a motivated response, and sometimes the motivated response is, okay, this is adjusted. It might be the easy case. And then the new rule will be published with motivation. And this is all within that model for open standards. And actually for government standards, there is a list that government agencies have to apply that standard or motivate why they are not doing it. And if you're on that list, you can also get a what they call mark of excellence. So you have your process in place in excellence, and then that means that they're not going to check every version that you update. So that process that does work somewhat, because there are a lot of governance agencies that are able to motivate why they're not using the standards. But I guess that's maturity of how this works too. So I took these examples, and might be a little bit overwhelming because it's two things at the same time, explaining what the standard does or what the solution does and how it's maintained. So I tried to summarize this and hope to get some feedback from you on the next slide. But what we've seen is there is many ways, but there is similarities when it comes to governance of the data. And there's a lot of facets to consider. I used facets because of our friend Menno this morning. But that's all in the colored boxes. And what we would try to look at is find a practical way for buildingSMART International, because we don't have expert groups or the time to work on those expert groups. We don't have to work on the expert groups because the data comes from elsewhere. But we need to do something about how are we going to distribute this. So the capabilities are delivering a mapping and storing service. I mean, it's a database, you could put something in it and you can connect to the outside. And we have a large community on domains, on technical, etc. And what we don't have is a national steering body, like a national body for standardization, or ETIM International with country members, or a specification system to actually have authors working on this on a day-to-day basis. So there's a big difference there. The basic needs, they also come from the workshops that we did, of course. Reliable data, that's the main thing to start with. Machine interpretable data needs to be reliable. And what we would need is like this document of 36 pages that Jeroen was talking about, guidelines to understand what am I looking at, what's the background, how is it put in, and see the process. And that might be a need for buildingSMART, have a template for a process description. So as an end user, you can check, okay, this is the way it works. I can trust this, or not, but then you can make an educated decision on that. And I put some items here with the 3 dots on it. Some service additions. The BSDD started out as a standard thing. Now it's more a standard service. So there's a difference there, but there might be functionality on verification, I can imagine. And look at open connections. I just said to Leon this morning that we have a test database or a test environment for the BSDD, and the STABU classification has been put in. And STABU is a proprietary system, but the classification we put out in the open. So that's the first 2 levels are open. But once you get beyond that, there's a subscription fee. How does that work? That's to be able to have that clarity about how that works will give buildingSMART and the data dictionary more reliability on what you're looking at. Know where the gates are, basically. So what I would like to see is, and then I'm gonna shut up a little. is in the next slide. I tried to put out something, or this was backtracking on what we said in London. From various rooms, people were coming together. So these are the items that I tried to touch base on and get to a, what I call a user story mapping canvas, and see what your view is on this. What should be done when it comes to governance of data? Because what we are planning out to do is have a proposal or a draft document ready for the next summit, with the items in there that buildingSMART should care about when it comes to reliability on data and how we're going to manage that. So I put some topics on here. Who wants to be the first? It's always difficult, I know. Questions is also allowed. Yeah.
Yeah, I see here in the fourth column verification, and in the previous session at the BSD applications, I asked Arthur like what is all in there, who can put it in there, and if I want to use it and I don't really know about it, what am I going to get out of it? Because I had an example of some particular asset that I wanted to get out of there, but I saw so many options. And then he said that they're already thinking about about verification, about a verification process of what's in there.
Yeah.
So I thought, how does that relate to this?
Verification on how to put data in, or verification on a context, which environment am I looking at?
That's a good. Well, I wanted to know that second one, but I'm not sure what he meant. Oh, you're here.
Who wants to respond? Oh, go ahead, Arthur.
Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, already discussed it a bit, but maybe somebody else is interested. So, what we were thinking about is to not basically build a barrier that you have to go through the process first before you upload, but you are able to upload something that was not verified, and you are the owner, so people will see who manages that. But we could have additional procedure, such as, for example, yeah, we have to define how this procedure would look and who would do it. And then some content could be verified, so there could be like a stamp on it, like Twitter verified account, just as an example, so that you can still use the content that is not validated, because maybe it's useful to your project, but some content should have some, yeah, maybe higher, yeah, I don't know want to use wrong word, but yeah, higher credentials, yeah, guarantees on them. So that's my answer.
Could that be dependent on what the data is used for? When it comes to, let's say, I was have discussions with David when it comes to a specification, which is part of a contract, you would have a different level than when it comes to, let's say, a product manufacturer or data sheet for commercial use.
Yeah. The verification process is not defined yet, but I'm looking forward to meet with all of you and discuss, okay, what are your inputs? Because, for example, yeah, I said checkbox, but to me it's not enough to have one checkbox, because there are so many levels. You can check compliance with data standards, you can check compliance with with particular use case, you can check relations with other domains. So many levels of verification that there could be. So.
Well, it's good to have a fresh product manager on the BSDD, and let's work together on this. Michel.
Thank you. So I think with this question, we are really in the middle of the topic. So data governance and what is data governance? And perhaps you remember the quite large and only partially on the slide, the processes that Radboud showed from CRB. So there's a reason that these processes are that complex and large, because that is really this part that you need an authority as a user that gives you the trust the data is actual, it's compliant, it's correct, it's valid, and so on, because otherwise it's not of value, because you have no idea who put the data in, how actual is it compliant to regulation, is it compliant to specific methods that are actual, and so on and so forth. And I think that is a little bit the challenge we have right now. So if you have a container like BSDD where you can put in something, you can map something, well, who did the mapping? How did they do the mapping? Is it still actual? Is it still valid? So can I really trust? Can I work with it? I think that is the topic we're talking about. Absolutely. So that's the governance part. And I think the huge challenge is, of course, also for buildingSMART, that needs people. You need an operation. It's not good enough to have a buildingSMART data dictionary. That's only the technology that does it. But on the other hand, you need an experts that really do this work, bring then domain experts together, and at the end of the day, have really this release management, the version management, and really grants for the content. And I think that is a very important part, specifically if you start to talk about product data and product information, because I have to have the trust that every data item I get is really correct and it's actual and it's valid.
Hello. This what we are talking about. For me, it is two different ways to secure data quality. The first is the data quality by system, and the other is a data quality of the owner of the information.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, two levels.
Two levels of it, and the question now is how can we do it as simple as possible without complications? Do you have some thoughts about it?
Yes, we do have some thoughts about that, but it's we have a system in the Netherlands. I relate to Jeroen also with 2BA. That's a data pool for manufacturers, and they can put data in there according to the item classification. The only check they do is a check how many fields are filled in and if it will fit in their data pool. There's no check on is the data complete or does the manufacturer put in the right values, for instance. So, and I don't know how CoBuilder does this, but they're a bit fiercer, I think, to be able to control what the manufacturer is doing. Manufacturers are not data experts. So at Stabe, we also check on is it in the right place in the system? Is it complete enough for the end user to be able to use this? And does it fit on the right spot? And that's the data quality. And then how many fields are filled? That's also almost a commercial choice for a manufacturer. As long as the template is complete and you can send them the template, they can say how many fields will I fill in. It's like with the CE marking. I think that's it's required that you actually there's one field that you have to fill in. The rest is not mandatory. It needs to be one. But the idea is that if manufacturers put in more, their competitors will also put in more, because otherwise they won't be found anymore. So it's something that has to grow. But it would be good to have some sort of ranking when it comes to data quality, to be able for the end user to have more idea of what he's looking at. Yeah.
Can I just add a comment to this? So, right, really questions, and right now in the BCD, there is a place to provide some of those information already, and it was done before I joined with many experts that contributed to the BCD data structure. So, some of this is coming from the standards, and there is a link where there is a place to put information about what is the quality assurance procedure for each content, each data point in the BCD. And there's also a place for you if you want to refer to the standard or your procedure where you describe in details who, when, how, and so on. And yeah, end of the day, it's not the main content that values the quality, it's the owner of the content. So yeah, just wanted to say that we have some places for those.
I have another one here.
Regarding the reliability of data, maybe this is a crazy idea, but I will hang it on nevertheless. As I understood on the previous session about BSDD, the owner of a certain product is responsible for maintaining the data inside BSDD. So buildingSMART will not classify or verify the data, but the users will. So why not, like in booking, the users can grade the information, and they will somehow be a competition within the owners of products to fill in more information they can to be useful for the users. That may be a good idea to rate from the user side. I don't know.
Thank you for your comments and presentations. Federal Railways. I will just make an addition to the question you've asked from the lady in front of me. I don't think the user is always right, and especially I don't think in a democratic process that the user is always right. And I want to highly support what Michel said, that there has to be one entity of whatever type of form to verify the trustworthiness of data if it's stored and given away to the public, be it in a technological way or be it in a content quality assurance way. There's a wonderful concept of the so-called, I don't know the English word, in German it's Bürobefahrlässigkeit, which makes the owner of the information liable if anything happens with data that's been done with the, and someone gets killed. The owner of the information is responsible for that. And that cannot be the public. That has to be an entity. Otherwise, there is no trustworthiness in the information itself.
Over here.
Small comment. Yeah, good ideas. I think the question is also, I don't have answer. I have some questions like, where do we draw the line? Because what you are suggesting, it's already in the ISO standards that tell us what data dictionary, how it should be maintained, managed. And the question is if BSDD is the place to do this, because we already have a lot of good solutions to keep, the discussion about authoring data dictionary. And to me, BSDD is more like the infrastructure to publish it. But there are already dedicated tools for different disciplines where people, comment and they have discussions. Somebody is, saying that this is approved, and then it can be shared as well. But again, it's open topic.
Yes, just wanted to comment on the product data side. Things we could perhaps also take to BSDD or buildingSMART is when you have a data pool like 2BA, like a lot about reference, before you can upload data as a manufacturer, it goes through 700 automated checks, like net weight should be lower than gross weight, things like that. But it's a ton of that. And then the users of the data, they can see whenever they feel like something's been entered wrong, there's a ticketing system. So you can write a ticket to the owner of the data and say, hey, maybe you used the wrong classification there, or maybe you misspelled something. That's something that could be maybe implemented also in the buildingSMART. And what I also see when you talk about data quality, we have a hard job trying to come up with a classification that has no errors and is complete. But that is no guarantee that the manufacturer is going to provide the data filled in properly. And the most common thing that we hear is, oh, we need to supply classified data. Let's get on with it. First thing we do, we hire a work student that is going to type in all the data, but the work student doesn't know all the products. So that's a danger. What we also see is that branch organizations try to come up with data quality guidelines, and they just set specific deadlines. Okay, within 3 months, all products must have a GTIN code from GS1 for identification, because all the wholesalers must have a barcode, and provided by the manufacturer. Or they should have a picture, and the picture should have 300 dpi, 5 by 5 centimeters size, for it to be able to work in my e-commerce system. And those things, you cannot automate everything. Sometimes you have to come up with the right procedure and a guideline and some agreements within companies that have this. Yeah.
I've also the impression that we mix up two topics. So I totally agree that content is with the manufacturer. So really, if you have real product data content, there's no way around it from a manufacturer. It will be the market that decides if there are manufacturers that have bad data, no data, incomplete data, whatever. So that's a little bit what you say. I don't know if you need a rating. So because if you make the experience that a specific manufacturer doesn't provide reliable data, then you will stop to buy with this manufacturer or with this provider. That's one part, but then you have the other part, and that's then where governance starts, in my opinion, and it's not about tools. So if you have something like a data dictionary, that's good and valid. That if you have numerous manufacturers that work on different data structures, that they are able to provide their content in a way that it's readable, machine readable for a lot of other systems. And that's the part where it's not sufficient enough to provide the tool to make this mapping. There you need this authority that really checks if the mapping is correct. Because otherwise you end in a mess. So that you have just different interpretation of different manufacturers, and then you try really to evaluate the product, for example, and that wouldn't work. I think these are the two parts really have to spread and talk about the two different topics.
Just having experience as working in the construction company and now from the manufacturing company. So I want to say that when I was working on the construction site, okay, it was BIM, it was everywhere, but we were focusing mostly on the geometrical and on the models, not about data. I joined the manufacturing company, and I just can't tell you that we have many people working in data masters. They are really dealing with the data, but we don't see any requirement from the construction asking us for data. So talking about, giving the stars for the, for the data quality, I think this is a little bit too much. Like just to have really the good requirements, and manufacturer will provide the data. So this is one. And really, I don't know how many manufacturers in this room today. Yeah. So just to give you the state of the, so when we talk about this data, just please be sure that you have all of stakeholders in the room.
I think we have. I think we need to differentiate the discussion about asset information requirements, things like that, because that's more high level. So then we talk about more like generic design requirements and asset data or product data or whatever you want to talk about. So I'm working with Magdalena. We've been working for a long time to make the BIM community to understand how manufacturers store their data, and for the future to share their data. And they are very much linked to providing their products to market under a product standard, which is either an ISO, a global standard, or it's let's say in the US, they use ASTM, and in Europe, we have harmonized standards that has test methods. So you test a system, a product, and you go to market with your data, with a focus on the data. And that structure, when the manufacturer provide that data, that's where the BIM standardization is using a dictionary, but only a part of it, to develop a data template so that you can exchange information between parties, where the manufacturer actually can be a part of it. So the request from the manufacturers is actually, can you please ask for the right data? And I think this is important, and this is within this work group here for many years. We have been discussing these topics, and now we have standards that frames this work. Yeah.
I think I'm almost going to repeat what he just said, but I want to twist it a little bit, because one of the struggles we've always had with BSDD, and just for everybody's knowledge, I've been involved since even the standard that it's based on, and that is the explaining to people to separate instances of data that you want to collect and identify versus define. So BSDD defines the data, and my vision of BSDD would have two primary purposes, or rather one primary, one secondary. A primary purpose would be to define what a concept is, so that anyone who's building data about it or exchanging that data, the receiver can see that object or that ID and understand, oh, this is what you mean, in any language. It was one of the side benefits. Secondary was, in addition to defining, putting a selected set of properties or relationships that could be associated with that known defined concept. So I always thought that the definitions in BSDD should be, maybe if I can give an example, a window can have many properties, but one of them, which is mandatory, is that it goes into a wall and there's a glazing component, and that's it. If you have a definition of a white window, it would have a mandatory property of color is white, but all the other ones would be extra. You can use them or not use them. And when you're building a database or talking about building certainly databases of product data, it's just you're building your own database, and you're saying that this object is what I'm talking about, and these properties and there's identifiers for each one is what these values correspond to. So when I send that data to a receiver, they receive it, they understand the definitions of those things, and they can then consume that data the way they should, appropriately.
This one is charged. Any more questions?
We got 18 minutes left.
Yeah, well, so do you have a funny story? Okay. An example. An example.
Well, about 15 to 18 years ago, when I first became a marketing manager of a medium-sized, large international company for HVAC products, I decided that it was maybe nice to spend advertising money on 3D objects, because clients were asking for that. So I thought, well, let's spend on that instead of advertising. And I told the salespeople on the next exhibition to say, tell everybody that we are BIM ready because we have those objects on our website. They can download it. We had quite a success. But then we had a visit from a BIM content creator that said, oh, what you done, you did it for nothing because we already did your homework. We already have your products. But I then took the newly printed catalog and I went over to their booth and said, well, show me our air separators. What's the height of that air separator? It's wrong. The height was wrong because I knew as a manufacturer that the R&D had made a change in the design. So now they are supplying, were supplying objects of our products that we did not create with the wrong sizes. And I've had also other instances where another company created like a template for a parametric object. And for an air separator, we had to fill in the PN value. What defines a PN value? PN 16 or PN 10? The air separator had a maximum working pressure of 10 bars, but the flanges were PN 16. So I decided to go for safety and I said, well, it's 10 bars. But a PN 10 DN 125 flange has a different hole pattern than a PN 16 DN 125 flange. We ended up being sent a claim by somebody who was trying to install the air separator and already had welded in counter flanges. And now all of a sudden the pattern was shifted. Who's to blame? You know, those kind of things is what you come across on a daily basis. And that's why data is so important and why the manufacturer needs to own up to their responsibility.
And this has to do with reliability for the end user, that he knows what he's going to get if he looks at who's delivering it. And that combination of who's delivering this data, then you can rely on it because it's coming from the source or it's coming from a consultant. And if it's not just a consultant, it could be a very good one and you can trust that one because you know that's going to be the
I mean, what's the validity of digital information if you read it from an old catalog and type it into an Excel sheet? I mean, it's nowhere. And they always say like a printed catalog is old the day it comes out of the printer, right? Yeah.
So there's a few people online chiming in too, so I want to get a chance. So Roger Grant says, by the way, hello, product room friends. What about the quality control step that only qualified or certified individuals should enter data into the BSDD? Is that still part of the data governance process to address quality on entrance? If so, who would govern this and review and oversee the work of these individuals?
I think, well, you already talked about this.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to hear your answers, but I would say that building another barrier, entry barrier, is not the way forward. We should allow content, but we should also be able to distinguish better content from the worse by way of filtering, some additional procedures to guarantee what is better, what is worse. And I'm not the expert to decide on it. We have domain experts, and I'm leaving this to you to think about, and we can.
Maybe the easy part is you can find the owner of a domain, and what's against calling or contacting the owner and say, well, what you put in the BSD is rubbish. Can you please retract it? I mean, huh? So.
Yeah, I'm a bit lost in this discussion. when we talk about data, what are we talking about? Because for me, here, the subject is the governance on definitions of things. And we are a bit talking about trust in product values, which is completely different. I mean, before knowing if the data provided by your manufacturer is the right one or the wrong one, we need to know if he has put this data in the right place, which is well defined. This is about the data dictionary. And I think that was your point, David. So I really think we are mixing two different conversations. And in my opinion, we shouldn't address the one about manufacturing data. Here we are talking about definitions, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not the use case of BSD to handle catalogs. So there is nothing to do with it, in my opinion.
Yeah, just full support, exactly as Frédéric said. Yeah, this is just a place to agree on the concepts and attributes, but not to put values of products. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe my question goes into the same direction after having witnessed this discussion. Who is the customer of a BSD in the future? Is it the product manufacturer or is it not? Because if the product manufacturer is just someone who is delivering information, which is a good thing, but who's the customer of that service?
Well, I think it should be associations. So it's the best if manufacturers get together and discuss that together and agree on one machine readable description of a property.
Thank you for answering. Yeah, I wanted to hear some other opinions as well. But I would say that the word customer is already maybe not the best term. I would say we have users and people who benefit, and there are many different perspectives. So people who publish, they benefit because they provide, they don't need to think about, for example, software integration because there are already tools that integrate. So they benefit from it. And people who use it, they also benefit because they get a source of trustworthy information. Of course, we were talking about what is trustworthy, but this is a separate discussion. But yeah, it depends how you define a customer. Is it the person who pays for the service, or because
there's very broad scope of users, implementers, partners, whatever you might call them. So it might be good that we also try to, well, say, classify the type of users we have to explain what it's about. Jeff, are there any more questions from online?
Yeah, so Roger wanted a clarification because at one time, this idea of qualified agents were a part of the BSDD framework or process. And does the question become, is that falling away, or is their role different? Or, you know, do you want to put in place a process over a person?
I don't have the answer for this.
Okay.
Yeah, too new to answer this one, but there's no such institution right now.
Right.
And I think, there won't be. But basically, me and people in the BSDD team, let's say, we are not the experts to say what is trustworthy, what is good. We can intervene when we see that this is, for example, product data, and we don't want product data. We can intervene if we see that somebody is breaching the licensing of content, because publishing something that is not yours is also not good use for BSDD. So we will not say that this is not the definition of a wall. We will say, maybe, if somebody wants to make suggestions, if you go to any concept, there is a button, according to ISO 12006, button saying, suggest changes, and the owner of the information gets the information, and he can or she do something about it or not.
Okay. Thanks.
It gives us 8 minutes left. Michel, you want to close it out?
No, question to the audience here, because I think it's important. The session is about data governance, And it's also a question from the product room steering committee to the community, to the audience. So do we need this kind of governance? So I think we had this discussion about content, where you say, well, content will not be a task of the product room. We've learned that from Magda especially that we should talk more often to manufacturers because there is already content, they have it. And then we learned that Data Dictionary is a tool, it is a platform where you will be able to map different structures. We have to expect different structures from different manufacturers. And now my question for perhaps for the last few minutes to get some answers or inputs concerning, do we have to provide from the buildingSMART side some kind of governance that this mapping is not only provided by single vendors or by agencies or by associations, but there's really some governance behind it to give reliability and some value in this kind of mapping. So that would be a question for me that I think it's quite important to go further on.
While you're moving the microphone, I think Roger wants to clarify that. So Arthur, I think what Roger was trying to get at is it's not necessarily about these qualified experts being necessarily domain experts, but more qualified for the process of entering data, making sure entering the data is being entered correctly with whatever tools are being used and that they're followed up on. And I think that's what he was trying to get at, this idea of a certified process knowledge person, not necessarily a certified domain knowledge. Like, it's not about they're an expert on the content, they're more an expert on making sure it gets into the BSDD correctly.
And this is exactly, yeah, the huge challenge, because technically you cannot upload something that is not compliant with the data structure of BSDD because it won't fit there. Yeah. And there is a really long validation, we have rules to check if you are uploading something that is correct and the relations are proper and so on. But are we to tell, me and developers, are we to tell that, okay, this relation doesn't make sense because you are pointing, from apple to banana and they are not related. So it's not this type of semantic validation that we can do.
Yeah, and I think that's what he's getting at. It's not so much even, it's not the semantic content as much as, is it valid data? Using a tool like Code Builder, what if somebody came along and said, I'm going to develop my own tool and start uploading things to the BSDD, right? Mm-hmm. How do I know that that person is qualified to be doing that? Like uploading content to the BSDD. Technically capable of doing it.
Good question.
Yeah.
And comment on this. I think, I'm really, my opinion maybe doesn't matter here, but my opinion is we shouldn't be building barriers. People are allowed to make content that is maybe not the best, but maybe not everybody should basically waste time looking at content that is chaos. So we should have good procedures to filter, browse. And as we have seen in the practical session before, for example, it was example from Clive, from Plannerly. They are first agreeing on what domains they want to use in the project, and they only browse the content of those domains because they trust NBS, they trust eTeam, they trust those classifications that are, basically well-known, and they don't trust others. So they don't see our demo domains because they are not trustworthy.
I still have a microphone, so I'll just answer your question briefly. For me, it's absolutely clear that there is a governance. A governance is much needed in terms of having being aligned with open standard principles. Because if there is something, I don't know what happened to the agents program, to be honest with you, but if that was something that was transparent to the users, then any other barrier we will bring up is something that is also intransparent to the user and which is against the trustworthiness of information. So I think it should be really clear for everyone involved what the governance is on how information is validated and published on the BSCD.
Yeah. Yes, sorry. I just want to answer your question. I'm totally a newbie in this area of BIM, coming more from the industry, and I'm a software vendor from the electrical room. And I'm just want to ask you, this BSSD, is this a kind of community-driven database for everybody because there's something that's better than nothing? Or do you really think that software vendors like we make a connection from our software directly to the BSSD for our customers if it's not reliable, 100% correct, the mapping and so on? We will not do this. So I hope that with your plans, you have this kind of business model. My main question in this room is, do you want to calculate the value of data? And do you want to have with the business model really 100% in this database? Otherwise, it's for a software vendor not possible to really create a benefit for the users if it's not reliable and if it's kind of 60% area. Sorry for this.
Yeah, I think this is a question to me, right?
Words.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm allowed to say because I joined recently, but I have my opinion on this. And I see your point, definitely. Yeah, as I said, we can end up with a chaos in BSDD, and we should have possibility to, find something that is, relevant to users. And I think we have good examples that we had today on the sessions, like how different people approach it, and they either know what content they are looking for, and they can filter based on the content that, for example, is provided by WaterNet or somebody else like eTeam. So then they don't need to look at the rest. And it doesn't mean that the rest is not useful, because we have examples of companies that, for example, let's say they only have 100 projects, and those projects reuse the same properties. Maybe those properties duplicate something from different classifications, and they use it. There are many people involved in those projects. They benefit from it, but maybe nobody else benefits apart from those few hundred people involved in those projects. But they can build relations to existing fields so others can see this content. And I think there is no, it might not give value to others, but it definitely gives value to those that use it, and those that don't benefit from it, they don't need to see it. They don't need to use it anyway. Yeah, about the filtering. So how do we filter the clean from not clean? So there are many ways. We could filter by,
So we are at just a minute over the top of the hour.
Okay. Yeah. So we can filter by.
Can I make a closing remark on that? Because I think that what you're saying is one of the views that we have to explain. So it would be great to take this topic and take the development you're working on and put them together in the mixer and work on explaining to new guys like yourself, you said, newbie, that you can have the documentation, technically, documentation for normal use, and mix it together and work on that together as product room, as BSDD, and get further from there.
All right. Oh, Michel? Okay.
Michel has he always has the last word.
No, I would be happy. So discussion was very interesting. I think also very useful. It's not finished, but a lot of valuable input. We are not yet ready. We will come back then latest probably next autumn in Norway. But if you want to support and to work with us, so please best over Radboud, who is in charge of this topic, so that we can go forward, perhaps in between, but latest in autumn in Norway, that we really proceed with this discussion and clarify a lot of topics. So I invite you to engage and to work together with us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michel. Thank you, Radboud. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone online.